Hey, hey, welcome back to The Good, the Bad, and the Techy, a podcast all about leading edge technology. I'm VP of Engagement, John Collins.
And I'm CTO Howard Holton.
And this week, we're here to introduce Heather MacDonald. Thank you for joining us, Heather. And we're going to be talking about workplace transformation. So let's make sense of it all. Heather, why don't you introduce yourself and just give us a bit of background to what brought you here?
For sure. Heather MacDonald. I am a principal consultant for workforce transformation at Pluralsight. I've spent the last probably decade in some version of systems change work, social change, really trying to figure out how can we support the changes that we want to see in our workplaces and in the world. So right now it's really working with enterprise corporations, figuring out where learning and development sits within their business strategies. But before that, it was, how do we support people in their journey through K through 12 into whatever version of higher ed or post-secondary education works for them and into the workforce.
Got it. I mean, we've spoken before, so I'm not going to kind of pretend that we haven't. We had a great chat a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, just before Christmas, about all the great things that you've been doing at Pluralsight. But what we thought we'd do on this podcast is maybe drill into the principles behind transformation. So all the things that you've learned, and almost what is it that makes it so hard and what makes it possible? Because we all use this term transformation like it's a thing. Oh, we just transform. Why don't we do it next week? And then people try, and 3 years later, they spent millions and not actually moved any further forward. So I mean, maybe that's too much of a characterization. Why don't we start with your kind of when you see organizations? I mean, is transformation actually a thing? Is it a possibility, or is it just a big term that we apply to tactical initiatives? What's your take?
Yeah, I think transformation, it's kind of evolution, really. It's because a lot of times you can't just quickly transform something. It is something that has to happen over time. And often, if you're talking about an organization that's existed for a while, it's really more of an evolution over time. It's making the little shifts that you need. I think the biggest thing that I see is people look at transformation. It's a buzzword. Everyone's doing it. It's digital transformation, cloud transformation, whatever you want to call it. But people don't actually go back to the root cause and understand the problem with transformation is not that you don't have the right resources, the tools, it's that you're not addressing the actual people part of the organization. Most companies aren't taking it back to the foundational level of number one, you need to be aligned across your entire org. So you can't have one, C-suite person over here doing one thing and somebody else is doing another. You have to align under the same effort and where you're trying to go. And the thing that everybody needs to have is a foundation for your people. If your people can't work effectively, if they don't have the tools and systems in place to support them, if we're not having our leaders effectively prioritized for them, transformation is just never going to stick because nobody has the foundation to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I'm going to get the takeaway from the whole podcast episode here done in right now, which is if the word transformation is attached, it's a change in your operating model.
Yes.
If your operating model doesn't change, you are not transforming.
Yes.
Right? When I see digital transformation fail, it's the same reason. It fails because people think it's a tools problem. It's not. It's an operating model problem. The tools support the operating model, not the other way around. Cloud transformation, exactly the same thing. It's not about running your data center in the cloud the way you ran your data center. It's just someone else's data center now. That's not at all what cloud transformation is. It's changing your operating model to support the way cloud operates and to allow your business to operate with that level of speed and agility, with a whole new view on GRC, a whole new view on compliance, a whole new view on capabilities, a whole new view on management, right? And workforce transformation is the same thing. You have to expect that we're going to change the way the workforce operates. We're going to change that operating model to support the new ways of working, to support the new ways of learning, to support the new ways of hiring, the new ways of promoting, the new ways of everything we did that was workforce before. And it doesn't mean that it's revolutionary, but it does mean you have to be in the mindset to say the focus is the op model, not, well, we will accept some op model changes if we're forced to, but are you sure we can't just buy Workday and be done with it?
Exactly. It's not about just saying, hey, we're going to give you a new tool to learn some stuff, or here's this new tool. We're going to use Kanban boards or whatever. It's really about going back and looking at, like, is the way we manage people, is our hierarchy working? And probably not. At the pace of change right now, we've got to get more flexible with how we think about how do we manage people? How do we team people? How do we work together across departments and functions? How do we bring new people in? It's also that element of diversity. Like, if you have a group of people that's only done one job in your org or in the same industry and they've always done it the same way, how are you going to cope with when the next chat GPT falls in your lap and all of a sudden everyone goes, oh my gosh, we don't know what to do? We could be spending the time, like, how do we bring in people with different insights and different backgrounds so that when that hits, you can bring the best of the best together and figure out, okay, what is our approach? What is our intent? Like, you don't have to have a chat GPT driven tool just because it's here. You need to know, why are you doing it? What's the purpose? What's the risk behind doing it? And I think a lot of people like, shiny new tool, let's just put this in play and see what happens. It's dangerous.
I mean, if we look at our hobbies work the same way, right? There's several things I'm very, very passionate about, and the number one thing I see is, what insert name of thing, tool, should I buy to make me great at this? Oh, none. There's no tool you could buy to be great at it. The greatest cabinet maker in the world uses hand tools and does it the same way they've done for 160 years, because they're trying to recapture the amazing things that people did with 3 tools that don't look like tools we'd use today. Right? It's never a tools problem. Right? Tools can help, and tools can also spark the change that's needed. Right?
Can I just put the caveat on scuba diving on that? Just saying that, the tools really help. Not buying in
but
those.
again, it's still a mindset, right? If you get all dressed up in scuba gear and effectively snorkel, you're still not scuba diving, right? And
Yep, that's very true. I was thinking there's the tanks, hugely important. There's the watch, not so much.
But if you think about it, right? If you don't know what you're doing and you put on all that scuba gear, right, and you're down in Mexico and you just hop off the side of a boat, probably nobody's going to stop you, right? But you have the weight belt wrong. You're in the wrong kind of water. You don't know how to deal with the lack of vision, right? You hit the bottom, the sand comes up in your face, and now you're blind. Are you going to be a successful scuba diver, or are you going to be the next piece of dead body they pull out of the water?
This got pretty dark pretty quick.
Well, but that's kind of my point, right? Is it really is about changing the op model, and the op model is kind of that fundamental piece of mindset that allows you to be successful with things. Tools.
And it's interesting. I think that the big word that you just said, Heather, was intent, which I don't see necessarily in all the organizations that I've worked at. And ones I talk to these days, they're not stopping and thinking, what change do I want to see in my operating model? They're going, can I get better because of this shiny thing? But they're not actually locking down what that means in any shape or form.
Exactly. Like, are we trying to make the customer experience better, more personalization, more access for people? Are we trying to comb through our mountains and mountains of data to get the actual insights that can drive our strategy and work? Like, what are you going to do with this? Like, just putting something out there for the sake of putting it out there, maybe it feels good for a second, but then if somebody can come in and hack your system because of it, if suddenly things aren't working and you're causing problems from a PR standpoint, that's reputational damage that you have to keep in mind. And it's hard sometimes when people just want to be, first to market, first to this. But also, if you don't address, again, the people functions and your systems, your op model, then none of this is going to matter. It doesn't matter if you can mine all of your data and get these insights if your op model doesn't allow you to actually use them. If it's we've got insights, but it's got to go to this guy, to this level, across this person before anybody on the ground can use it, it's out of date by the time it hits the hands of the people who can actually transform that data and information into usable, actionable insights.
And you're probably also back to the game of telephone, right? The first person to receive the data is in organizations like that. When you have that kind of data firewall, the person receives the data and they go, I disagree. So almost universal, those two things go together. Okay, so the second they say, I disagree, they're going to say, I've done it this way and it's been successful, so we're going to disregard some portion of the data that we don't like. Then it gets to the next person, and because that's obviously the culture, they go, I disagree too. And it twists a little bit more. And by the time it gets down to the people it should have come to first, it no longer remotely resembles anything useful.
Yep.
It's my favorite logical fallacy bias thing, where we just go, yeah, it doesn't fit with what I'm hoping is true, and therefore,
Therefore, it can't be true.
Right.
therefore it just can't, because otherwise I can't sleep
Right,
tonight.
confirmation bias. Well, and it's the same thing too. I think we have to get to a point where we are willing to work across, like, just because you're in the C-suite doesn't mean you have to know everything. Part of that is like, how do you take the wisdom you have in the, the journey you've got to that point, but combine it with the information and the talent that people have that are actually doing the work. I think it's very easy to fall into that trap of, oh, I'm a VP, I'm a senior director, I'm whatever. I need to have the answers. But if you're also not looking into your organization, so much of the answers are right there in front of you. People will tell you what's wrong, why it's not working. But if we're not willing to listen to that and say, okay, either here's how we are going to address it, or actually we found data that's counter to that, we're not going to address it, you miss these opportunities to actually make a tangible impact, both for your customers and for the people who work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and if you believe in the cascading restriction of authority or agency, you're a bad leader, right? Like if you're listening to this and you're like, well, the reason I don't allow that is because my people make mistakes and I don't know what mistakes they're making. You're a bad leader, right? Let your people make mistakes. Give them the agency to do so, because in that agency is all of the good that you really want. Right? I want the people that talk to the customer to be able to positively affect the customer and not say, I'm sorry, sir, it's policy. We have to escalate. Okay, cool. The second you say that, I know I'm not getting any help.
Yep.
Right? The number of times I've had to say, would you mind giving me a survey result? Like, did I help you? No, you didn't help me at all. However, it's also not your fault. Like, I'm not upset with you. I'm upset with your organization. I understand the constraints you have to work in. So I really appreciate you being polite when you told me to go get bent. Right?
Exactly.
But I prefer not to be told to get bent.
Yes.
Mm.
How can we solve those problems? How can we actually work together? And it's true, like if you are the type of leader who is, I just need to put boundaries on people, I just need to formalize this, we are getting past the point where constantly formalizing everything into you do A, B, and C every single time. It's not going to work. People's challenges are far more complex than just here, do A, B, and C and get the results. Now you have to think again, like when people don't think about this system wide, they're thinking about their problem, but it's like, well, what are the other things that impact your problem? I can give you the perfect on paper learning program, but if there is compensation issues where I'm compensated to keep the best of the best on my team, I'm not going to work to help you gain, new skills and move on to a new opportunity. If my bonus hinges on keeping the best people on my team, that's a compensation and HR issue. If you're not talking about it, no perfect tool for learning is going to get your managers to give up their best people.
Well, and we tend not to be motivated to give up our best people anyhow. We tend to be motivated to do the exact opposite, right? Which means we lose the ability. If we're motivated to give up our best people, then we're also motivated to keep them inside the organization, because this is a good organization where you want to work. So we want to move you through, promote you through, continue to build that and grow that. The second you say we're not motivated to do that, then the only opportunity for employees that want to improve is to leave.
Yep.
And all of that investment walks right out the door. And then you have to start it over. And guess what? As they walk out the door, every person that they've touched, watch them walk out the door to something better and something brighter. And they go, well, why am I still here? And eventually they walk out the door, and the same pattern recurs over and over and over again.
Yeah, these problems are people problems.
I'm reminded of a friend of mine, an old neighbor of mine in the village we used to live in. He worked for a utility company, and he worked up. He was through his 20s and 30s, and eventually, having gone through every step, he ended up on the board of the company. And his shock, I remember him telling me, was that it was the same people he'd worked with all the way up were the same people that were on the board. He was expecting these kind of, I don't know, superheroes or something, that the kind of, they got there through vim and expertise, and somehow having something that no normal people had. And they were just the same folks. And he was terribly disappointed. But it's a lesson to everybody that you kind of think that the board level is going to kind of have some kind of secret sauce that you get. It's like the book that you get when you become a dad. It's the
there's a book you get when you become a dad.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
didn't you get one?
No. If anyone has an extra copy, you got to send it to me. Yeah, it must be a Europe thing.
I'll talk to you offline, Howard. Okay.
Secret book.
Because mums get to talk to each other. Dads kind of sit in their caves and wonder, So there's a thing there. But that's a. But what I was going to say was, Heather, do you see when you work, because you work with a lot of organizations, what does good look like here? I mean, is it about the organizational aspect, that the organization gets it and therefore the people are kind of already there? Is it specific character traits that kind of go, this is going to be a platinum, or however you categorize it? We're gonna do some serious change in here, or what does good look like?
Good looks like leaders who are willing to collaborate and reach across to the other organizations and bring the right people together to make these decisions together. It's not just one person saying, this is the thing of the minute, we all have to do this and get on board. It's when you have leaders from, again, HR and L&D and your tech teams coming together to say, it's what we're doing isn't working. We need to create change, and we understand that this is a systems change. They understand that this isn't I roll this program out and all of a sudden everyone's smarter and better and more capable. They understand it starts in pockets. You test your little pilots for change. You figure out what works and doesn't. You start to scale the things that work. You dump the stuff that doesn't, and you layer the stuff on, because it's never just one thing. It's what is your tools for learning, but then also what does your leadership development look like? There's some interesting data out there that's like most people don't get formal leadership training until they're well into their 40s. And often at that point, they're already VP level. So you have this entire group of people who has never received formal leadership training, maybe beyond like, here's how you get people to do compliance. You're now responsible for that. Make sure people go push the button. Like, you have this huge opportunity to better support your leaders who can better support your people. And again, then there's also the layer of like leadership up at the top. They need to understand, how do I prioritize for the teams and people under me so that we know what we're focusing on? I talk to people all the time who are like, oh, I've been doing this thing forever and I'm not sure anyone looks at it. And then they look at the data and find nobody's looking at it, but they're spending hours and weeks doing work that's literally meaningless because nobody bothered to ask the question of, is this still necessary? So we need leaders at all levels understanding, how do we start moving that stuff away? And again, what's your intent? What do your people need to focus on? Do not expect your individual contributors and your frontline leaders to figure it out, because they won't. They don't have the training and support. That needs to come at some level from top down, at least until you have that culture that can support the bottom up, where it truly is a collaboration across the organization.
So it's funny. We did a podcast yesterday on my other podcast, and one of the things that I said was, real change has to come from the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bottom up. It's not top down. And those are the two things that we tend to end up with. And I think it goes back to the other thing that you said. I think it ties in. Middle management is frequently referred to as worthless. They just are, right? This shouldn't be a revelation to anyone. I've been middle management before. It often feels like you have the least amount of agency and the least amount of job satisfaction, mostly because it's just management. It's not leadership. Yep. You're not taught to lead. You're taught, if you're taught anything, you're taught to manage. Manage is things, right? We lead people, we manage things. And so management is a waste because it doesn't help with morale. Mm-hmm. I've never told anyone, hey, here's the new system that you have to use to fill out your whatevers, because someone decided, go do that, and had them go, this is fantastic. This really makes me feel better about my job. Mm-hmm. Right? We don't get that as middle management. Right. However, leadership at the top is generally too disconnected from how the work actually gets done. Right. The bottom doesn't get to see the overall strategy. Yep. And without bringing the middle along, you lose all of that. They are the connective tissue inside an organization, and yet they're frequently ignored or pushed aside, or told this is either going to come top down or bottom up, which just further says, well, what do we do then?
Or side in, like, let's get the consultants in, which is really diminishing.
Right. And let's talk about that for a second, because I have yet to have, like, you go to leadership training as an executive and you listen to a consulting company as an executive. I've never seen those messages come together into one thing. Mm-hmm. Right. I've never had an Accenture presentation that went, we're really going to focus on people. And for those that have been to the following 7 leadership trainings, you'll see this takes the strategy and the philosophy that they taught you there and carries this out in reality. No. They are once again more like, we're going to remove more agency from your people. We're going to treat them more like drones. By the way, if you could just remove their names from any further spreadsheets, we'd really like a way to anonymize them using statistics as much as possible, so we can tell you who to get rid of. Right? It's the worst crap in the world, and then we all follow it and go, "Why is morale so bad here?"
Yes.
Well, you just ask 24641. They'll tell you.
That's true. That's true.
Exactly. Go into the roster and find that person. It's true, though. I have said so many times on other things that I've done is like middle management is your linchpin for success. If you do not bring them along, if you do not enable them to provide the right support, senior leaders, the message only gets so far where your bonus is tied to the results. That level always gets it because they have the insight and information and they have the visibility. Everybody, like you said, at the bottom of the org, they're like, I just work here. I don't even know why some days. I need my check. I'm not going to complain because I need a check and to go home. Your middle managers can change the dynamic so much in helping to what is the message that we all need to be focusing on. They're the ones who can drive morale. And again, when they're enabled effectively, they can support people in that mobility that works for them. Whether it's, I want to go up the ladder or I want to go across and do something new. They're the ones who can build that space of, people stay here because they feel seen, they feel heard, they get the development opportunities that make sense for them. They know there's a future for them. When you start to cut that out and all of a sudden you feel like a number, people go, the grass is greener. I'm going to follow my friend who went that way, or things get shaky and they're like, well, 2 people got laid off. So I'm just going to, either go over here or I'm just going to lay low and do the bare minimum. Like those aren't the things that you want, but it's such a missed opportunity to really connect in with that level and empower them. But again, it's like, we have to start seeing as leaders, it is no longer about command and control. You can't just tell people to do the thing and expect the results to happen. If you want to be able to keep pace with change and with what's going on, you have to get people to the point where they are actually empowered to make decisions and to move the work forward.
Yeah, it's about inspiring, empowering, and managing risk.
Yep.
Right? Empower people just beyond the point of your risk tolerance. Because they're not going to fail every time.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to fail. Generally, they're going to fail very seldom. Right? So if your risk tolerance is a 7 out of 100, and I know tons of those organizations. I don't know any orgs that are a 99 out of 100. But I know a ton that are a 7 out of 100 and 11 out of 100 and 19 out of 100. Then enable your people to go to an 8, right? Or a 12 or 13 or a 22. Right? Like inspire them, activate them, actualize them, give them all the things, all the tools they need to actually have some control over the outcomes and see what happens. The organizations that do that the best are the organizations with the happiest customers and the happiest employees.
Yep. Exactly. Well, and it's giving them clarity on like, what are the boundaries you can stay in? What is the expectation of accountability? Because again, like if I know I have to be able to rationalize my choice and that I have to own my outcome, I'm going to make smart decisions because I'm going to be willing to stand behind them and say, sorry, boss, here's what I thought. Here's what my thought process looked like. Here's what we did. Help me understand where I went off, where it went off the rails and how that didn't work. But if I know that, then I'm going to feel comfortable in doing that. But then again, like the leaders have to create that space of like, when you fail, it's about learning and failing forward, not about reprimanding, putting you on blast to your peers. There's got to be that safety and transparency for people.
100%, right? When you fail, it means you tried something.
Yes.
Right? And that's what we want. That's what we should all want. If you want to be a leader in your space, you become a leader in your space because you tried something that wasn't the status quo. The status quo doesn't make leaders ever.
Yep.
Right? So if you're trying something, then the risk is there of failure. So if you have an employee that comes to you and says, hey, I messed this up, I failed at this, that should your response should be great. Right? What did we learn? And how do we make sure that we don't fail the same way again? And then go do it again. Go fail again. It's fine. Just let's try to not repeat the same failures so that we know we're learning and evolving and improving. But bring me your failures. Right? If I have an employee that's worked for me for 2 years that has no failures, I have to question, what are they doing? Right? And are they happy? Because they're certainly not trying new things. Right?
I don't want to go biblical on this, but it's in my education, and it's the parable of the talents. It's the person that buried the stuff because he was afraid of doing anything wrong with it, and he got the slap, biblically speaking. But it's I just want to pick up on a few things. So very quickly, Heather and Howard, what you've been saying is it's about prioritization set from the top. Great. But engendering that collaborative culture, which was one of the first things you said, Heather, which I think is so insightful. Thank you. There's really like, oh, right, get that right all the way down. But then it's bringing in that collaboration into the middle and enabling and empowering that kind of middle layer. Because if people aren't moving things forward, then the organization is slipping back. And therefore you're not something you said very early on, which was transformation can be evolution. And my dad used to have an expression which was go north. It didn't matter as long as you were progressing, because eventually you will end up north. So whatever you're doing, just have dynamism, have motion, and so just hopefully that's pulling a few things together in terms of threads.
Transformation isn't the start. Like, let's be really clear. Transformation isn't the start. It can be the destination. The start is just a step. Right? So people hear transformation and they think revolution, and they think, therefore, the start has to be this big bang. Right? We suddenly have to be seen as big and loud and huge and taking these huge leaps. In doing that, you're going to leave people behind.
Yep.
Right? If you take a small step, right? Worry about headspace. If you take a small step to get people's headspace turned in the direction you want them to look, right? Aligned to the target, seeing the same destination, and then allow them to move the first bit at their own pace, you're going to be far more successful, right? Than just going, well, we're done.
Yeah, get it together or get out. Right. Nobody likes that kind of directive.
And it doesn't work.
Yep.
It doesn't work, right? Okay, cool. So all your A players that have options, they've left.
Yep.
Right? So you know what I mean? Like the people that are the least motivated in your organization, the people that are the most calcified in your organization, are also the least likely to leave. Right? They have to be told to. They have to be forced to leave. Right? The most likely to leave are the people that are fantastic, fabulous, and have the most opportunity and the most desire to do great things. Because if you're not going to let them do great things, they'll go find someplace that will. Right?
Exactly.
So that kind of attitude, and I see it all the time. It's just awful. It's just awful. I want to talk about a statistic for a minute, and this is something that surprised me. I was doing research for one of the reports Gig Ohm was doing, and from research from Department of Labor and Indeed and a few other sources, said that enterprises have 41% of their people in management. Right? And if you think about it, it sounds weird, right? But look at some of these organizations and recognize that the average person can manage, right? Have people report up to them. That is between 10 and 20 direct reports, and about 12 to 15 is ideal. At about 16, you start to lose track of the number of people you have reporting to you directly. It's less efficient. You've got 250,000 people in an organization. Not a lot of direct reports at the end, right? You have a lot of middle management to keep that number between 12 and 15.
Yep.
So 41% of people are management, and you frequently leave your management behind, and you're not teaching them how to lead. You have 41% of your organization, minus the C-suite, which is some less than 1%, that are left behind, that are dissatisfied, that are playing the game of telephone with every message they get because they don't understand it. You've never got them on the same page. Right? They never understand the strategy. They're just told it, and so they repeat it as best they can, which is never close to precise. Right? So you go through 7 layers of management. What's the message going to be like when it gets to the people that actually have to do the work?
Yeah, it's too easy to lose in translation. It's too easy. And especially nowadays, I think with the global workforce, a lot of places are hiring outside of, it used to be everybody in 50 miles of an HQ, and that's where your workforce came from. Now you're talking about also working across, time zones, cultures, like the variance of what you have to deal with as a manager could be, dealing with people who are in the US who are used to working how US folks work, but then also working with teams potentially in Asia or in Brazil or, in Europe, and the subtle differences in how messages get relayed and how that information is, shared needs, you need culturally competent leadership to manage a global workforce. It's no longer this is just how we do it here. It's like, okay, cool, but half your team is in other places. If you can't effectively work with those folks, you just risk that message getting worse as it goes down and down that hierarchy of people.
Sure. And keep in mind, you never trained that leadership when everyone was in the office to lead. Now everyone is remote. They were remote for some period of time. You didn't train that leadership how to manage all of a sudden and lead all of a sudden there. You've just made it harder and more complex. And they don't have the ability. Let's say your company was 100% remote or 100% in the office. Then you went to remote because everyone got sent home from COVID. You hired 0 new people. It's been 4 years, so that didn't happen. But let's just make up a fantasy world where you hired 0 new people. Now you say everyone has to come back to the office because that's the message from the top. Cool. Why? Why do I have to come back to the office when all of my KPIs are as good or better than they were when I was in the office? And frankly, this is better for me. I don't know. I'm told. It's an order from the top.
Mhm.
Is that kind of message going to breed positive morale? Right? Are people suddenly going to go, "Oh, well, I mean, in that case, that's great. All right, I love that. I love that. I'll be in the office tomorrow." No.
There's a thing behind all of this, which is I'm going to have it as my takeaway. It's assumptions that so much change is predicated on the basis of, well, it's going to work, ignoring all of these realities. And if you and what you were just saying, Howard, was essentially exacerbating the realities by assuming they didn't exist, which kind of makes it double wrong. But the big assumption, so the big thing I would say in any organization is, what are you assuming is correct in order that this can be successful? Throw it out of the window. Find out what it is. Grab it in a neck hold and get it out of the virtual office as quickly as possible, because that's going to be the thing that brings you down.
Exactly. If nobody is disagreeing with you or nobody has something else to say, even if it gets overridden, you don't have enough voices to inform your decision. Like, you can't make an effective decision as a leader if everyone just goes, "Yep, that sounds great, 2 thumbs up," because it also works for them. Like, a lot of these return to the office mandates, it works for the people who made the decision because that's what they're used to. It's what they like. They all had private offices. They, maybe they didn't have to commute in these times because maybe they've got a driver or something else. Like, it works for them, or they have help in the home. So leaving all day wasn't a big deal. But when you're not talking to the people who this is a significant and major impact on their life, like, of course you think it's this great thing. Like, everyone's going to be excited. People want autonomy. They want trust. Like, we have to be willing to admit that.
Quick story, if I may. When I first got my managerial office, I thought it was the best thing ever because I could go in and shut the door and get some crap done.
Yes.
And I was so pleased, and I felt the kudos of it. Worst decision I ever made. To go in was the first worst decision. The second worst decision was to shut the door. So again, because I completely lost touch with my team.
Yep.
I didn't know I was losing touch. So it's that kind of, just because, as you say, it's the right decision for me. I go into the office.
Mhm.
That's what I like to do. I'm completely losing touch with the realities of the way everyone's working out there, and therefore I'm not getting the best out of my people.
Yeah, I love what you said about it doesn't affect them, because it really doesn't. Right? Work from home is great for me. I mean, sorry, work from the office, return to office, it'd be great for me. I have a nice big office. I set my own schedule, right? So I can completely avoid any traffic,
Yep.
right? No one gets to call me out on it. I don't have young children anymore because I'm in my late 40s at this point. I don't like saying that, but I am in my late 40s. My daughter's 22, so she's independent, right? The income when you get to the C level is high enough that you probably don't need 2 incomes at home. It's not such a forceful thing, right? The freedom that you get when you're in the seat to make that decision, and generally the freedom that the people that directly report to you equals yours as well, or is close enough, that
Mhm.
you're making this decision through the only lens you have. And this is not it's not a problem that you only have one perspective. We're only given one perspective. That's all we have. That's all we're built with. But if you surround yourself with people that only have your perspective, you're just going to get back the same BS that you put out in the world. And I promise, no matter how open you try to be, if it's just your perspective, it's still BS. Right? Surround yourself by people that have a perspective that isn't yours. And if they're not in the room, invite them in the damn room.
Yep.
Make sure that every room that you're in has people that do not share your perspective. And if they don't say anything, find out why. Right?
Exactly. Don't just expect everyone, especially if you're one of those people. And I think it happens a lot. High level leaders are very much like, throw their ideas, they verbally process, they have no issues throwing out their opinion, because most people aren't going to disagree with them. But if you've got people in different levels of leadership, different experiences in the workplace, you might need to do things like, let's give them the information ahead of time, let them write out a response and set it in, or let's use some polling tools or other ways that people can be part of the conversation, but not have to verbally process out loud. I think especially as we talk in tech, like if you're talking about folks with, who are neurodiverse, who are coming with different perspectives on how they approach work, some of them are not going to want to have a verbal thrashing in a room of their peers. That's not fun to them. It's not fair or equitable to them either. Again, giving people different ways that they can process that and still have their voice heard matters. And that's the stuff that keeps people staying at your organization. When they know that they matter and that they contributed and that you care about their opinion and perspective, people can deal with it if you don't take their perspective and you go another direction. You're the boss. At the end of the day, that's your choice and you're accountable for those decisions. But people want to know that, hey, I heard you, but from a business standpoint, this is where we're going. And people can go, okay, it is what it is. I've at least had a chance to speak my view.
There's also no downside,
Mm-hmm.
right? The upside is there may be something really, really innovative, really good, really groundbreaking that you get from a place that you wouldn't have otherwise asked. And so I will also recommend, and this will be my final thought, if you're going to poll, please make sure that your poll isn't for multiple choice questions. You're just leading people to a foregone conclusion when you do that. Give people as much ability to be extemporaneous as possible. Right? And be smart enough to recognize that extemporaneous is good and you're looking for commonalities, you're looking for threads, you're looking for innovation, you're looking for something unique. Right? And then don't be worried about grammar, because you're also likely to ask people questions that don't speak your language as their primary language and may not be as comfortable with it, right? So unless you want to suddenly learn all the languages of all of your people and allow them to respond in their native tongue, be very forgiving of responses that don't fit the grammatical or sentence structure that you're looking for, right? And ask a lot of questions. So I know that was a lot to say as my final thought, but I'll leave it at that. Heather, I'd love 3 things that you'd give to leaders to become better at workforce transformation and kind of get themselves in the right frame of mind.
Ooh, I think one thing would be open to the possibilities. Again, what worked in the past, even 5 years ago or more, is not going to be what carries you to the next level of your organization. So be open to new and different possibilities. I think the other thing would be is that what we've just talked about, surround yourself by diverse perspectives and diverse voices. A lot of people, I think, are flipping back to that. Oh, I want people with master's degrees and PhDs and 20 certifications and 16 years in this industry. You need to be willing to look outside of, again, the people who have the same lived experience as you. That's going to get you to make better decisions. That's going to increase that creativity and innovation. I think the other thing would be is don't ignore the people in your organization. Again, if you have not talked to the people on that first level, talking to your customers, you probably need to show up and start doing some of that. I think most of the wisdom to fix the problems that occur in any organization already exist in the people who are here doing the work on a day-to-day basis, but we ignore it because those people don't have the degree, they don't have the time in the organization, they don't have some fancy title, when really sometimes the changes we need to make are infinitely small in the grand scope of things, and making those small changes are what could lead to that bigger transformation long term.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, this has been another episode of The Good, The Bad, and The Techy. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. And if you disagree, we'd love to have you on the podcast. If you agree, we'd love to hear your comments. If you've got something you'd like to talk about, reach out and let's see if we can get you on the podcast. Heather, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a ton of fun. I've known you for a while, so I kind of figured it would be. So I'd like to say I'm surprised. I love to be surprised, but I'm not. You're a fantastic guest. We'd love to have you on again. So thank you very much, and
Love that.
have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thanks.